Well, hello there, you beautiful people. My name is Willow, and welcome back to the Step-Stool Ladder Podcast. Now, it's Supreme Commander Forged Alliance Forever, and we are going to be casting a Step-Stool game, meaning a low-ranked ladder game. So, we're on this map via 3 Protectorate again. Apparently, it's the only map where interesting things happen around this time of year or something. I don't know, but let's go ahead and introduce our players, starting in the bottom left with the blue player by the name of Juicy. They are a blue UEF going first land. And then over here to the top right, we have ourselves a red UEF going first land by the name of olp-O-mat. I'm just going to go with Matt from here on out. So we've looked at this map a couple of times, 63,000 reclaim spread out everywhere, a bunch of reclaim here in the middle with that mass fabricator. And yeah, we're just going to be seeing how these two players intend to do battle on this very, very fun map. Also, just because we're going to have a little bit before anything's happening, I wanted to talk about a couple of things about the channel. I'm debating possibly doing a tournament, hosting a tournament. And I was wondering if there's anybody who'd be willing to contribute to a prize pool for a tournament if I were to look into the requirements for doing so. The idea of the tournament would be a 2-player teamed system, and it'd be on the Dark Heart map, so it'd be a bunch of 2v2v2s. So I think that would be super interesting, and if you do too, just let me know down in the comments or in Discord if you'd be willing to try and help get a prize pool together for that. And yeah, that's about it. And let's go ahead and look at the players and what they're doing. We do have a very early Mech Marine and Snoop out from Matt. Meanwhile, Juicy going more for the engineer spam and only engineer spam kind of side of things. Either way, we will be, of course, expecting these players to try and branch out and grab these 2 areas in the top. We can see already orders, very long engineer orders out from Juicy to try and grab each and every one of these little spots as they go out. I just noticed that whenever I control shift, it lags the game for some reason. That's a little bit weird. 1 second, I do want to check something in the settings. Somebody did tell me, yep, my fidelity preset is going to stay on high. Now that I went into a normal game and changed it. So we do have these high fidelity with weird shadows that are like clipping and shit. But high fidelity commanders, look at them. That look so realistic. Those 2007 graphics really paying off here in the year 20-something. Also, something's wrong. I do need to actually change a setting. Gameplay, zoom sensitivity, turn that up because... oh, that's up too much. Oh, yep. I was watching this Willow's Duality cast, and he spent like the first 5 minutes fucking around with settings. Worst caster NA. Meanwhile, over here we do have ourselves Matt building the first air factory of the game. Gotta see what they plan to do with that, and now this sensitivity just seems way, way, way too high, so let's bump it down to 28. That feels about right. Okay. Meanwhile, we do have Matt just spamming up a lot of power gens. This is actually kind of a bad idea because... or no, not Matt. This is Juicy building the power gens. You'll see that Juicy is going to have way more power than is needed and will have wasted a ton of mass on building power gens that aren't needed. Of course, it is a little bit of future-proofing. As long as they don't get punished for building too many power gens early, that won't be an issue, but... very, very strange to see somebody going for so much power spam so early. But of course, this is some low-rated play. In higher-rated play, you see people building the bare minimum, and when you look at their personal eco, this is just kind of balancing for about the first 10 minutes. It's barely balanced, and then they overbuild power with T2 and T3 power gens. Meanwhile, we can hear a Mech Marine firing. Over here, Mech Marine has gotten first blood, killing off a... oh, wait, no, the Snoop got the kill onto the engineer, and this little mass extract is going to die, and probably this one as well, as we don't see any units out to really deal with that. A striker being produced now to try and protect that expansion, and probably another engineer queued up here soon to go ahead and grab that out from Juicy. Meanwhile, over here we have a Mech Marine approaching and going to attempt to do the same exact thing that was done on the other flank over here. This time, though. It will not impede progress, as there's an engineer out over here trying to get itself an expansion up, and there's no knowledge of that because the radar on the Snoop does not quite cover that range. Meanwhile, we can see that the Snoop can see the engineer. The engineer is going to run away. I think that Juicy has... Nope, not quite spotted it, but the engineer is by chance going to be running away, going to a much safer location, queued up to build nothing. Strangely, this engineer might be on a patrol route, or I don't know where it's getting its orders. It doesn't, like when I hover over it, none of the orders light up, so a bit strange. I think that this engineer is queued to build this, the PD and the mexes. Meanwhile, the Mech Marine has barged its way in and is going to start working on a mass extractor. Mech Marine over here was destroyed, which was thankfully lucky for Juicy, as they did get the striker out to destroy it. No, the Mech Marine wasn't destroyed. The Mech Marine fell back instead of trying to greed for that mass extractor kill. Could have very easily gotten it, I feel, being a bit timid with their resources, but that's better than being overzealous and thinking your units can do more than they are capable of, like running a Mech Marine at a comm. Meanwhile, we can see the Mech Marine just doing its thing. Gunning at that. You know what? Let's just give you a cinematic look at that. Oh man, Mech Marines look very cool. I don't know why the Mech Marine is so quiet, even though we're right next to it. But that is a dead mass extractor. And over here we can see that engineers are going to clash and meet each other. More mexes have been grabbed by Juicy, but if there's not a reclaim order out very quickly, then these mexes are going to be forfeit, because this engineer can just capture all of these if they feel like it. Meanwhile, over here we can see some tanks dying to the civilian AI. Unfortunately, the civilian have the same color as the red player, so it's a little bit hard to differentiate. But as long as we just remember where the AI is, or the civilian AI, I guess it's slightly different. Like, it's a lighter color of red, but it's hard to tell just at a glance. Meanwhile, we do have some striker tanks coming over to this flank to try and kill off some mass extractors and possibly an engineer. The engineer's not quite going to finish that PD. As long as these tanks continue forward, this PD will not be able to save these two mexes. Meanwhile, we can see this engineer having a crisis with their life, not knowing what to do, as they've been queued up to build a bunch of mass extractors and are now just walking in circles, now being given the capture order. And that mass extractor is going to die, was not able to be completed. The engineer also dying for the cause. Meanwhile, down here we do finally have this expansion being retaken by an engineer, but it does look like the engineer might die to a striker, which would be very unfortunate, but is possible. We've already finished T2 for Juicy, and they are working currently on T3, which is a very, very early T3 upgrade, and we do have a shield and some T2 power up. T2 land on the way as well, so we could see some tech advantages start to creep into this match, but then again, Tech 2 land has been achieved by Matt as well, and that's going to be very good for Matt. Meanwhile, the captured mexes are going to be killed off by some land spam out from Juicy, and we can see that this southern flank has also been shut down as the engineer has died again, so there's not going to be any expansion. So overall, just looking at the mass values, we can see Juicy slightly behind at 33 mass a second, while Matt is ahead at 43 mass a second. Looking at reclaim, though, we can see Juicy is ahead by almost 2,000 reclaim, sitting at 3.3 thousand versus 1.2 thousand for our red UEF players. So overall, total mass wise, it does look like Juicy is in the lead, which is very, very good for that player. Of course, being very kill inefficient, losing a lot more for the same amount of investment compared to their opponent. Meanwhile, over here, Matt has gotten a little bit of a staging area for a few units. A lot of archers mixed into the unit composition for Juicy is going to be a little bit of a downfall. The archers, of course, are nice if your enemy has bombers, but there is no sort of play like that at the moment. I'd like to see some swap up into possibly pillars to try and make this situation a lot more easy to deal with, pillars would cause massive issue for any Team 1 force attacking. Kill off a lot of tanks per each pillar, but then again, Juicy is just trying to expand some more, sending out more engineers this time to grab these expansions than they have in the past, learning from their mistakes, trying to just get more done. Mech Marine over here still alive with 1 kill, and the Mech Marine over here is also alive, but is going to end up dying to a striker. Unfortunately, with 1 veterancy, that Mech Marine does go down. Meanwhile, tanks that have pushed in for Matt have shut down this expansion once again. And these engineers probably should be given orders to stop trying to grab the little bit of mass extractor play right here, as, well, they'll walk in and die to the strikers that are poised right outside the front door of Juicy. Meanwhile, Matt doing air now, getting up some T1 bombers, so maybe those anti-air that have been spammed, those archers will come out in spades and cause issues for olp-O-mats and their attempts to rule the skies, as it were, with these Scorcher T1 attack bombers. That one sitting at 1 veterancy. Meanwhile, we have a couple more sitting back at the base. Bomber's going to be very useful relatively soon. We do have a T3 power on the way already, and of course a bunch of T2 mechs coming up online in the main base of Juicy. We have T2 mechs also online for Matt. The mass reclaim, though, lead, it grows. It was 2K the last time we looked, now it's 4K. Overall, giving Juicy the advantage on total mass accrued this game. Although we can argue that the mass has been accrued better by Juicy, but has not been used quite as effectively against their opponent, as all of these reclaim routes, and getting all of this reclaim doesn't matter if you're losing units at a 2-to-1 ratio, and that's almost the situation as of the moment. Meanwhile, these strikers are still pushing in, almost, a couple of them almost at 1 veterancy, which is quite... You never really see T1 units with getting a bunch of vet, but this one's about to get their first rank of veterancy and go to 330 health and 1 health a second regen. That is ridiculous. Nerf that striker. Meanwhile, we do have some T1 bombers over here, just killing off a striker that's also at 1 vet. Just madman rolling through the countryside, killing off everything. But so far, we can see that the only expansion that's been solidly grabbed by anybody has been Juicy grabbing this western flank. Although the comm for Matt is over here and there's a lot of production, and it does look like there might be a change of hands up in the future. Meanwhile, we do have T2 PD going up on the, well, on this area that hasn't been attacked whatsoever. Matt is just kind of paranoid, building up some flak and some T2 PD, trying to make sure that nothing approaches from this particular angle, which you can't blame them. They are low-rated players. They're scared of losing, so they just play very defensively and build PD pretty much everywhere. But we do have an archer committing suicide by striker, which is a very strange situation. This PD up here that was keeping this area safe has been destroyed, as we can see, and this could be a successful push, killing off multiple mass extractors. Not nearly enough land up here to protect this area out from Juicy. Down here we can see a little bit of a push coming out from Matt. Matt being the much bigger aggressor in this match. So far, Juicy happy to stay in the base and get comm upgrades. Getting RAS on the comm now after getting that T3 P-Gen, and is looking to eco it up. I forgot to switch back to normal mass income, but we can take a look at that. Juicy is taking the lead at 68 mass a second versus 49 for Matt. Ecoing a lot harder, investing a lot more into the areas that are held by them. But we can see that this area up here is going to go down momentarily. T2 starting on the comm of Matt. And of course, you have flak everywhere. Let's just go ahead and check on the flak numbers. We have 3 flak up and 2 triads. Let's go ahead and check on not the wall numbers. Can I we have 2 T1 PD. Now let's go ahead and just compare that to the player who's ecoing more. We have 2 flak. Yeah, both players building a lot of defenses, and of course we can know that for a fact Juicy's lost a bunch of T1 PD this game. Both players relying a little bit heavily on it, but Matt being a lot more aggressive, clearing off this entire top hand of the map, and that is a good way to win games if you build units. As I've said, building units, very good strategy for winning. And if we were to judge this game entirely based on who has built more units, well, so far I would argue that Matt is going to win. But at the same time, we can look at the economical side of that, which is another big part of how to win games. And Juicy is just simply doing better, accruing almost 10,000 more mass this game, and is going to have a lot stronger footing for possibly pushing into the mid and late game, being able to spam out T2 and T3 armies a lot more effectively. Of course, that is going to be waning as more and more T1 mass extractors go down to these pushes out from Matt. Meanwhile, some pillars are now arriving on the scene, and pillars are very strong vehicles. They do have those double cannons, which I still don't know why the cannons have to fire at the same time. Seems like a design flaw in my opinion. If you were going to put 2 guns on a tank, fun fact, you'd want them to be independent firing. Like in real life, if you were gonna put 2 guns on a tank, you definitely want them to be able to fire independently of each other, even if they were mounted in the same turret, because of the fact that fire rate is one of the most important things to look at with a wartime vehicle. Sure, fire rate and firepower should be balanced, but if you have these 2 cannons that fire at the same time, that doesn't actually increase your rate of fire, it just increases the firepower. And you know what? I don't need to explain this, I don't think. Just I would like it if the pillars for some reason could fire independently and have a much higher fire rate. Assuming both guns fire at the same speed, if they were firing independently, they would shoot twice as much, and their damage per second would be a lot higher. And also, you don't always need both shells to kill off whatever you're shooting at. It's overkill. You don't need to overkill. You just need to do enough. You don't need to do more. Especially in FA, doing more... Well, not necessarily in FA. Because doing more in FA is generally better. But... It's, yeah, I don't know why this is a stupid-ass tangent. We're done talking about the pillar, and the fact that the guns don't fire separately is stupid. Because it is. But, even on naval ships, they don't fire, they fire the guns, like, staggered. They stagger fire them. Not in the same turrets, they use separate turrets to stagger fire, but generally you stagger fire. You use... like the forward turrets to get the range and the rear turrets. Yeah, it's just weird. I don't know. You can do a full broadside with a ship, and that is a legitimate strategy, but a lot of times you have a lot of ships with 4 turrets of 3 guns, because you can get ranges a lot easier, and you can have different spreads, and it's very nice. Meanwhile, over here we can see that these units out from Matt are getting quite a bit of inroads on towards the main base of Juicy, who is currently just building a Ravager on the wall. Juicy is building a fortress and is not dealing with anything. This might be the rare instance of a level 5 UEF turtle. Also, I'd like to point out, I think I should get a cookie, because I didn't even for a second try and say Terran. Come on, guys. I'm becoming an actual FAF person now. Like, I'm invested in the game enough to not call them by a different game's monikers. God. I've been playing a lot of games with the Australians on the ANZ Discord. Australians and New Zealanders? New Zealandites? I don't know. And it's been a lot of fun to play some games with them, and it's nice because I know that I fuck up every single one of their names, even though I shouldn't. Over here we have more pillars showing up, but this time we have a mongoose, which is going to stand and fight the pillars inside the range of the pillars, and guess what? It's going to die because that's not what it's for. We do have a pillar over here, but it's going to die. We have a lot of pillars in this game. Seems to be a UEF thing. You say pillar and striker and Lobo and Mongoose a lot when casting UEF mirror matchups, I feel. Meanwhile, a lot of T1 PD being thrown up to deal with this little bit of an incursion out from Matt. Matt is going to lose this little bit of an engagement, but overall we can see Matt has catched up and even surpassed, possibly, not quite surpassed, but nearly surpassed Juicy in the ability to produce mass every second. Meanwhile, when we look at Reclaim, we can see that Juicy still maintaining a solid 7,000 Reclaim lead versus their opponent. Or not 7,000, 3,000. That's 3,000. Guys, I can't count. Help. Numbers are hard. Words are hard. Everything's hard. Help. Send help. In the form of joining my Patreon so I can take English lessons. Oh, God. Meanwhile, we have another large T2 army out from Matt. Matt poised to cause critical damage here, forcing Juicy back onto the main eco of their starting 4 mexes. These might be some of the only mexes held by Juicy. Juicy currently has 5 mexes this game, versus overall Matt is holding, these are all the T2, these are, nope, that's not what I wanted. Okay, I want all the T1, all the T2. Matt holding 20 mass extractors versus the 5 of his opponent, and that could be the deciding factor in this game. It's looking very one-sided so far, with Matt causing a lot of damage with these armies and doing a lot of harassment, but T3 mass extractors are strong, and Juicy is still able to hold out in the base, having a lot of static defense to just deal with any attack that may come. Juicy moving back towards the base, building more triads inside of it. We have a official level 5 UEF turtle over here. Ravagers, point defense, flak, everything, pulling out all of the stops as long as they don't move. Juicy has a strict, if it moves, I don't want it strategy, and we'll have to see how it works out. These strikers trying to focus down the power generator from the looks of it. If they do get the power generator, that could be bad. It's going to chain react and also end up killing off this T2 power gen, I believe. I think that's in range for the chain reaction to kill it off. But this P-Gen is dangerously low to going down, and it is down, killing off the entirety of the power grid, I feel, for Juicy. But then again, we forgot, Juicy got Ras, so Juicy doesn't even need that P-Gen. Juicy can continue to build Triads, Ravagers, what's the name of the flak? Flayers, where's the flak? Did that kill off all of the flak? You gotta be shitting me. Well, Triads, Flare, just keep on building AA. AA for life. Anti-air, PD, what more could you want? What more could you want? Meanwhile, on this flank, we can see that a push out from Juicy has been successful and has stopped any kind of expansion over here. We do have a mass extractor that was grabbed over here for Juicy, which is going to increase the number of mass extractors held by this player by a large percentile, surprisingly. Meanwhile, all of this reclaim is going to be hoovered up. We do know that at this point, Juicy is very good at the reclaim side of things. And also, despite all of the lost ground, still sitting at 78 mass a second. Of course, Matt is about to crest 100 mass a second. Now, sitting back, ecoing very well. We have T3 land out from Matt, producing a whole bunch. Okay, Matt. Matt. My man, Matt. This, unacceptable. You building another HQ? Come on. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just, if you're going to build 2 HQs, build one on the front, build one in the back. That's the only exception I give. I don't give people shit if there's an HQ like over here that you built first, and then later on you build an HQ in the back in case you're worried it's going to die. That's the only excuse. Other than that, don't build 2 HQs. Another HQ is more expensive and doesn't have more build power. I'm 99% sure that's truth. It might have more build power, actually. I might be lying on that point. But even then, it's not worth it. It's way more expensive, and you have to upgrade it from scratch. Meanwhile, you can build support factories with any engineers of that level. Some T3 power being queued up for Matt. Meanwhile, over here, we can see that this base is going to be rebuilding the power gen, even though Juicy doesn't need it. Juicy, if you are watching this, you may want to know that if you have plus 1,000 power, you don't need another T3 power gen. I know you're building it for probably some reason. You're like, oh yeah, oh wait, we can check. Let's see, what's your build power? You have a build power of 40. What does the HQ have? A build power of 40. So no, it doesn't even give you more build power. It's just more expensive and slower. Don't do it. All right? You understand? Cool. Meanwhile, I guess maybe this is for the adjacency, worried that the factories are going to pull too much power, but at the same time, that's not necessary. Your priority now would be getting this mass extractor back up and getting up some kind of army to push back the impending horde of units coming out from Matt. But we can see how long this turtle strategy works. This Ravager over here on 25 kills and 1 vet. Another Ravager has been built. There are triads scattered about, all of them with varying levels of veterancy. This mass extractor being rebuilt finally as another push comes out, and it's going to be thwarted. This is less units than you had last time, Matt. Consolidate your forces onto one flank at this point. If you know your opponent is going to be playing this style and going to be hiding in their base building defenses, you want to consolidate your forces into one big push on one side. Don't split up your forces. Don't send them in bite-sized chunks. Keep them, get a huge force, an overwhelming number of units. Click onto their base, shift G if you want your units to get into the base faster, and watch them destroy. Meanwhile, over here we can see a Ravager just farming kills onto units that are sitting right inside of its range. This is a very nice Ravager location. I wonder if Juicy has played this map before and has just decided that this is a really good spot for a Ravager. Admittedly, it is. I'd actually like to see this Flayer, be turned into a Ravager, reclaim that, and replace it with another Ravager, as it's such an effective spot. It gives you such a large range of denial. That is a legitimately good spot to build a Ravager. You can even try and get one up on this cliff. It looks like there's a 4x4 area where one could fit. And get more Ravagers up. I mean, if you're gonna go for the turtle strategy, you may as well do it interestingly, and I find this to be interesting. Building it on that little cliff. I would never have thought of that myself, mainly because I don't turtle. I build T1 spam, and if that fails, I lose. It's generally how my games go. Meanwhile, over here, we can see a bunch of Stingers. Stinger Assaultcraft doing their thing. And I don't know if these are an attempt to snipe. Is that what you're going for, Matt? Matt, if you're going for a snipe, I have sorry news. You're not going to get a snipe off on somebody who's doing this unless you use strap bombers. Strap bombers are about it. And even then, strap bombers can be countered. A lot of people are like, what do I do about strap bomb snipes? If you have an idea that a strap bomb snipe's coming, way outside of your base, build a giant circle of, like, you could build AA all along this line I'm hovering over with my cursor. It'll kill off all but an absolutely ridiculous amount of strats. And all of that mass that they spent on strats, you should have spent somewhere else to try and secure a victory. Meanwhile, these jesters are going to be moving in slowly, it looks like, trying to kill off any spam that comes out of the base of Juicy, although there is very little spam to be heard of from Juicy. Juicy instead relying more heavily on the static defenses and not really having a strategy. This is what not having a strategy actually looks like. There is no strategy to win from Juicy. Juicy is embodying the I'm not losing mentality. There is a far difference from not losing and winning. Winning means that, okay, I have a strategy within the next 10 minutes that I think that this will end the game. And it doesn't mean the game will end in 10 minutes. You should just always be thinking, like, no matter what stage of the game you're in, you should be thinking, all right, what do I need to do to win this game right here, right now? Because if you're just playing to not lose, or you're just playing to combat their army or deal with their army or deal with their units and not do something aggressive and cause problems for your opponent, you're never going to win. That's some life advice for you. But Juicy is now looking to get a bit of a strategy up for winning the game. Going to be spamming out a lot of factories very quickly. Does have a ton of reclaim, 20,000 reclaim already. Of course, the map has about the same amount of reclaim that was on here whenever we started, but Juicy has been reclaiming quite consistently. Overall economy, 100 mass a second for Matt versus 121 for Juicy. Unless Juicy starts spamming out, oh my gosh, really? Am I seeing this correctly? Gonna spam out a whole bunch of clank hammers, and they're gonna be built quickly because there's not a lot of mass going into things like units. Of course, still stalling over 100 mass a second, not great, but of course has constant reclaim patrols going on, which is that what these are for? Are these gonna build engineers for reclaim? Are these gonna build units or engineers for reclaim? This is a big difference if they're not building units. Meanwhile, we have Percival's on the eastern flank trying to come over here and finally break this little shielded base of doom. And I really think that Matt right now is having that issue. Honestly, Matt, this is a point for a fire base. You bring a bunch of engineers over here, you build a fire base right here. Then you amass your army on this eastern flank, and your enemy can't push out up here and re-expand, but you do have a massive staging point, and your units are going to be more effective if they're all coming in from one side, because you're going to have all of your units right there at the same time. If there's a fire base like this where there's defense built on all sides of it, it's going to strain it if it's attacked from multiple sides. But if you just have a bigger force that hasn't been whittled down at all, because it's very hard to coordinate both of your flanks attacking at the exact same time. We have some Titans out, going to be massively sniped off by a Percival or two. But it is nice to see some Titans coming out, some units attempting to fight. A huge scared posture out from Juicy on the air front, already building Cougars, even though there's no indication that your opponent is going for heavy airplay. There's just gunships. And honestly, gunships are dealt with just a few flak. That's all you need. You don't need Cougars to deal with gunships. They're in fact bad at dealing with T2 gunships because they're single target. Meanwhile, we can see that mobile missile launchers and other bits and bobs are about to die. We have oh my gosh, these gunships are about to be annihilated. These gunships are about to be just absolutely bone-around. This Ravager is going to not only kill whatever units it's shooting at, also going to kill off all these gunships that were tasked with killing it off. But it is going to cause some damage to this shield and make it harder, but we do have so many PD. 1, 2, 3. We have 7 triads. What's the name of the T1 one? 7 triads, 25 DM1 plasma cannons, and 8 Ravagers. This is a base you can't really approach with a land army unless you have a Fat Boy. And even then, now the Fat Boy is becoming a lot more difficult to deal with, as there are almost 5 Clink Hammers online to cause massive trouble. So many PD. UEF is the faction to turtle with. They are so good at turtling. The only thing they're bad at is naval turtle. Naval turtle. I'm a turtling with my navy. If you're gonna turtle as a navy player, go Cybern, because harms are fucking broken. Harms are busted, cracked, absolutely banging units. Harms are bred for the hungry. Meanwhile, we do have some Percivals over here, and the army has seemingly decided to group up over here. This shield has gone down, and this Ravager is at threat, but the Ravager's getting 18 health a second, and it has killed 8.5 thousand mass worth. Just for a reference, A Ravager only costs 2,000 mass, so it's paid itself off 4 times over, and none of these units can shoot straight up, but the Ravager can get shots down at them pretty easily. So this Ravager is in a very nasty spot, but there are tactical missiles coming in to kill off that Ravager, and it's going to be a good night, Eileen, here very soon. Of course, still regenerating, possibly going to get another rank of veterancy before it goes down. Only needs to kill off 1 more unit to get another rank of veterancy. It is a possibility, but it does go down before getting that veterancy. But now you have the issue of your units are getting pelted with clink hammer fire. This base is absolutely designed to be very difficult to deal with, and that is what it is. Percival going down over here, and Juicy kind of looking like they may be able to mount an offensive here soon, getting up their own T3 land spam, and also having archers, lobos, random bits and bobs being spammed out of land factories to kind of just be meat for the meat grinder that is the armies of Matt, and is kind of making this match look a little bit unsure. We do have a Duke that was queued up and on the way, but all of the engineers for it have stopped. I think that is Matt realizing 148 mass a second is not enough for all of this production, plus the building of a Duke. The comm of Matt does have T3, by the way, I think. Good luck, have fun, and you too. These players being very kind and very nice in the chat. T2 only on the comm of Matt. So that is definitely not a solution to this situation. Meanwhile, we do have, of course, all of these units sitting here actually going to be absolutely dismantled by Percivals and spearheads and lobos and pillars. Just an absolute hodgepodge of random units. We do have an SMD on the way. Juicy making sure that they can't even be nuked, so all of these structures are going to be safe as long as Juicy can find a way to start getting some damage done on the other side. At this point, Juicy, it may be time to eco up and try and go for your own Duke, because it does look like Matt is having significant trouble with breaking the base, and it is a difficult base to break, but oh my gosh, all of these buzz kills. Wow. A very interesting match going on, in my opinion, with just the constant attempts out from Matt to try and push into this area, and Juicy just saying no. Juicy is literally Gandalf right now saying, "You shall not pass." But you will have to see. A constant little war being waged over on this eastern front as the units meet each other. Spearheads getting significant damage done. In all reality, these spearheads are gonna be killing off some units because the units aren't moving. They're not being microed at all, so spearheads were surprisingly effective. We also have demolishers out trying to kill this off. I want to correct myself. So I did have a very cool post in my Discord. I can't remember who posted it. I think it was Aaron. Aaron is Samus759 for those of you who've seen my casts, who did point out that I was wrong. These T3 mobile artillery do not kill Fat Boy. My basis for them killing Fat Boys is I've seen it a couple of times. But if the Fat Boy is microed, there is no way that these will kill it. Like, not in 100 years. They don't outrange the Fat Boy, so that's why. Meanwhile, over here we can see that these units out from Matt are being slowly whittled down by T1 artillery and various hodgepodge of T1, 2, and 3 units, and we can see that Juicy is kind of spread out and has resurged. If you were to like just right here go through the entire match and make a time lapse, you would see it shrink, and now it's expanding again. And as Juicy expands, it does look like Matt's offensive has just kind of run out of steam. The Duke seemingly completely abandoned. Is there any other large project on the way for our red UEF player? It does look like T3 mexes are coming online. I don't know how long we've been sitting on reclaim. Let's look at the economy of Matt, sitting at 200 mass a second with 17,000 reclaim versus 148 mass a second and 34,000 reclaim. Total mass overall still massively ahead for Juicy. And Matt, if you're watching this, Or Juicy. Juicy, 1. Good job on the reclaim. You're doing actually pretty well for a 300 rated player doing reclaim. Also, I forgot to mention very early on, like I should have, it's a 338 versus 366. This is a very, very close in ladder points rating players. But Matt, reclaim. There is a ton of reclaim around your base. There is a ton of reclaim just pretty much everywhere. You've killed off all of this. There's 3,200. Just control shift shows you all of the reclaim. It does what I'm doing right now. The only thing it doesn't do that a mod does is give you this area up here and put big mass areas with 3,200, like this mass fab's worth 3,200. You have an engineer sitting right here. Why aren't you reclaiming it? Are you spending all of your mass? Not quite, but still, there's more reclaim would have easily bought you this match, I feel. Meanwhile, we have the calm of olp-O-mat moving forward and deciding that if I can't beat them, I'll join them. Building up a fire base right outside of the massive fire base, going to have a lot of work to do to catch up with Juicy, but it is possible. Not T3 on the comm, so this fire base is going to take a little while to build, but this is going to be a situation that Matt could possibly just try and win this by building a bunch of fire base-esque things, but it's also a huge risk. If enough Percivals just start marching on over here, this is a death for Matt. Matt putting the comm at risk. The comm is the only important unit in this game, so you need to make sure that you keep it alive. And putting it on the front line to build a fire base, while heroic, possibly even noble from a weird, twisted point of view where you think building structures is noble, yes, it is. But at the same time, it's very dangerous, and it's a fool's errand, and you only have yourself to blame if you die when building a fire base at 40 minutes right next to your enemy. We do have, of course, the spearheads making life exceptionally difficult. A 4-vet spearhead with 2,000 mass kill. That's an accomplishment right there. Like, not gonna lie, that is kind of crazy. We have a fat boy being started over here for Matt. That could be the solution to their problem, but it's gonna be a hard-fought solution with 12 clink hammers. It's gonna be difficult. And we can see Juicy, while they are a level 5 UEF turtle, the perks that come from being a level 5 UEF turtle is the entire map is your fire base. So what's going to end up happening is this, where slowly expanding while building a whole bunch of defenses, and that's the plan out from Juicy from the looks of it, just going to build defenses all the way up this western flank. We do, of course, have a large push of T1, T2, and I guess there's probably a T3 somewhere around here. Units out on the western flank, stopping all of this from being built up by Matt. Matt has managed to grab this area down here and has set up a fire base in order to prevent units from just very easily walking over here and destroying this expansion. But this area has been destroyed, and Matt had control of it for a long time. We do have broadswords coming out to try and cut off any reinforcements, as this is all cleaned up by the T2 army up here. But it is interesting to see this little push with, honestly, just a band of mismatched units and a very bad unit composition, honestly, make a significant push out over here. And we can see that just the amount of units and the amount of stuff coming out from this base from Juicy is just constantly growing. We have how many T3 mexes out from Juicy? We're currently sitting on 6 T3 mexes, and that is very significant. That's a lot of mass a second, versus olp-O-mat probably also sitting somewhere around that with 5 T3 mexes, and of course an absolute ton of T2 mexes. Well, actually there's only 5. An absolute ton of T1 mexes. There is 18. The T1 mexes do really tell a story. We do have some T2 mexes out here for Juicy, and we have a lot of units just kind of congregating here in kind of a staging area out from... No! The spearhead! The spearhead king has died! Long live the new king who is over here. A Demolisher also out over here, going to start killing off, whittling down on all of these units that were built up over here, and that could be a problem. Meanwhile, the Firebase is having issues. Is Juicy power stalling? No, Juicy is not power stalling, and there's no signs that Juicy was power stalling anytime recently. The Fat Boy is on the way. No, Juicy was power stalling, did lose a lot of power at some point, apparently relatively soon. Possibly reclaim related, I'm not sure, but either way, we do have this Firebase still holding. Matt's comm still surprisingly far forward, in my opinion. A bunch of T1AA now being spammed up because you have T3AA, may as well get T1AA. Just all of the anti-air. And this base out from Juicy, possibly the unmovable object that was unable to be moved by Matt and is now so threatening that I feel a snipe is the only way you end this game. A snipe or mass Fat Boy and accepting massive losses with your Fat Boy, because these Clink Hammers, they don't fuck around. They kill Fat Boys real quick. You only need like 7, I think, to kill a Fat Boy, and there's 12 here. Of course, 2 of them or 3 of them are up here, but still, we know that when the Fat Boy over here shows up on the front lines, that immediately Juicy is going to build more artillery. So this situation is very, very difficult for Matt to deal with without getting T3 air or without going to standoff tactics. And for a moment there, it did look like Matt had a decent idea with the Duke, but that idea is also a risky one because it would mean possibly giving up a lot of ground. The Duke is very expensive and you have to put a lot of mass into it. It's going to slow down production of other things. So it's a tough call to make. Meanwhile, as we look at Reclaim, we can see 49,000 for Juicy versus 22,000 for Matt, but the overall total mass accrued still in the favor of Juicy, despite having so much less map control this map. Just literally, I said it the last Step-Stool, but it's just like, no, I'm gonna stay in my base. But still, we do have Juicy doing quite well for themselves. And as you can see, I told you that this level 5 UEF turtle is that situation where it's like everywhere is my Firebase. Expanding and building just nothing but PD everywhere they can is just a very much so a power move. Just constantly like, okay, well, you can't break my Firebase and my main base. What if I just move that Firebase forward? What if I move it forward again? Of course, this little area is going to be killed off, but how long before more engineers show up and build this up even more? Because I'm sure some of this survives, especially with units now coming in to try and deal with this, and the help of the Clink Hammers from the back absolutely taking swaths of this army down each time. The Fat Boy does manage to complete and is going to be pushing forward relatively soon, I would hope. Fun fact, whenever you are building an experimental, if you want it to move the second it's done, if you select it, hold shift, and give it a move order, once it's completed, it will move forward. Fun fact, fun tip, nice little thing you didn't know beforehand. Meanwhile, the Fat Boy is not moving. I thought I saw it moving on the mini-map. It wasn't. It was just looking weird on the mini-map. Meanwhile, over here we do see some pillars that are going to die. And see, some of these defenses survived. So once more T2 or T3P engineers come down here, they're going to be building more. Of course, Juicy, with all of this defense building, has been running their economy a little bit close to the, like, it's a little bit difficult to run your economy like this. Getting a lot of reclaim every second, almost at some points getting as much reclaim as they have normal economy, and just a constant engineers. How many engineers out on the field right now? We have 28 T1 engineers just out doing their thing. Grabbing up reclaim, hoovering up more and more stuff. A heavily assisted T3 land factory is pumping out a lot of Percivals, it would seem, or just T3 units in general. We do have an attempted TML snipe, but these buzzkills from earlier just shutting that down immediately. These TMLs not going to be super effective, as once you see it, you're gonna just start building more TMD. A bunch of buzzkills. How many buzzkills is that, you may ask? And I'm asking the same question. And we have 26 buzz kills. That is a ridiculous amount. Of course, there are a bunch over there, but 26 buzz kills is nothing to sneeze at. And 6 TMLs is not going to be enough to get that snipe coming in. Probably trying to snipe the comm. The comm did just move to build kennels, which is... I don't know if build power is your issue right now, Juicy. I think your issue is you don't have enough mass. We do have a T2 engineer out over here, and we can see that... I think it's about to be ordered. No, it's just patrolling. Whoa! Whoa! Those are some optimistic patrol route. Look at this. Look at, dude, this man has the patrol routes for days, just patrolling everywhere. Holy crap. Patrol heaven. Look at it. You can get a seizure from this. Patrolling literally everywhere that you can put a patrol route. Deciding that's how the game's going to be won. Of course, it does have the bad side effect of you're running a lot of units into fire bases right now that could be surviving elsewhere. But I guess if there's ever a chink in the armor, if there's ever you know, an area where your units can run by, they will patrol over there and run by. We do, and of course you have this benefit of you have a bunch of units over here. They see the enemies right here. They're going to just immediately throw everything they have into moving towards this. And all of these units are going to be doing their thing. Oh, wait, no, these were given a move command. Never mind. The Fat Boy is now on the front lines and is going to be killing off T1, T2, and T3 units in droves. And this could be a very big issue for Juicy. We will have to see if Juicy has a solution to the Fat Boy. We have a second Fat Boy on the way for Matt. And this fire base just absolutely ridiculous. Just all of these clink hammers not quite in range of the Fat Boy yet. The Fat Boy being smart, staying right outside the range of it and killing off units as fast as it can. We would like to see Matt continue that strategy. Just keep your Fat Boy on the edge of the artillery. Don't let it get hit by artillery for a while. Build up a few Fat Boys before you even attempt to make a large push towards the base. But we will have to see. A lot of Percivals out here. These Percivals are very tanky, able to take a lot of punishment, but we've seen a lot of Percivals dying to the fact that they're sitting in the range of these clink hammers, which just constantly are barraging. Let's just go ahead and check on the veterancy of some of these clink hammers. Some of the originals are back here. 10 kills, 1 vet. 6 kills, no vet. 20s, they've all killed thousands of mass worth of stuff. What about these clink hammers? All of them still killing over 1,000 mass worth of stuff. And they're still being relatively effective. Of course, this push now coming in a lot closer, trying to push quite hard. And it does look like Juicy has given all of the artillery the order to attack the Fat Boy in particular. And the Fat Boy is going to be melted down really quickly. The question is, can it get rid of some of these fire-based elements, some of these defenses, before they end up losing ground to this? The Fat Boy just lobbing shells over the cliff right there, getting quite a little bit done. Control Shift F1, Control V, and back to the normal screen. We do, of course, see engineers going down, and the Fat Boy has died right here. And honestly, that's kind of a mass gift, because the second this area is reclaimed for the, or like, pun intended, once the area is reclaimed by the units of Juicy, then that's just going to mean that this is going to be reclaimed. This 5,800 mass is going to go towards building more defenses. We have more clink hammers on the way. Juicy, immediately upon seeing that Fat Boy, clink hammers. That was the solution, and it was one that was stuck with. One thing I am noticing, though, is the SMD is not loaded. It's been built for a long time, but isn't loaded. And that could be very important, as we do have a Stone Ager on the way out from Matt. The Stone Ager, of course, being the nuke launcher out from the UEF. The second Fat Boy has all but been abandoned, with only one T3 engineer working on it currently. And that is, of course, a very sad moment when you decide that, nope, experimentals don't work, time for standoff, going to go for, of course, the nuke option as far as standoff tactics go. Of course, you will have to find a way to snipe the SMD, and I'm sure that's something that Matt has thought of. I'm sure Matt has had a full scout of this base for a very long time, and yes, indeed, there is a full scout of the base right here. You can see the SMD, so I would guess you're going to try something to kill it off. Possibly try and sneak some broadswords down under, or over here on the eastern or on the western flank to try and kill off that SMD and get a win here. But it does feel like Juicy is slowly just pushing out. Of course, it's kind of relative because these bases are somewhat scattered, but they are slowly getting more progress. This northern area above the main fire base out from Juicy is definitely getting more ground held for it. Of course, you do have the small issue of all of these units have been going in piecemeal, dying one at a time, creating these massive mass fields. 16,000 mass right here. Right here we can see 17,000 mass, and if you zoom in, if you go a little bit closer towards the side where the units are coming from, it goes to 22,000. And just this constant situation. It does look like the Fat Boy has been reclaimed. Whether it's pretty much guaranteed been reclaimed by Juicy. And we're seeing some Clink cameras going up for Matt as well. Matt queuing up a mass extractor right here underneath the shield. Matt also walking out from the shield, surprisingly. Getting some reclaim themselves, trying to just get onto a footing where they can find a way to end this game. I would say that Matt is definitely struggling with finding a solution to this fire basing. We've seen a few solutions before, especially in these on this map in particular. Last time it went to artillery and nukes. This time it's kind of leaning towards that once again. You're gonna need arty, you're gonna need nukes, you're gonna have to find a way to deal with this without having to throw units at the problem. And it's a very difficult situation to deal with, but it is one that can be overcome. This firebase is not invulnerable, it's not impervious. There is ways to deal damage to somebody doing this. It's just much, much more difficult and requires much more finesse to pull off. Meanwhile, over here we do of course have a bunch of units streaming in towards this firebase. Of course, still not quite getting the returns that are expected from somebody who's on such a high eco and producing so much. Meanwhile, we can see the ecos have finally seemingly swapped over. Maybe not. 227 mass a second for Matt versus Juicy at 178, producing much less mass per second than his opponent is Juicy. But Juicy is currently reclaiming like a madman, having power stall issues, building a bunch of power gens in the base. The shields have gone down temporarily, and that could be a massive issue. But once this power gen completes, I'm sure the power issue will be resolved. Meanwhile, this nuke eliminator still unloaded, which is a surprising situation, and that means that the second one over here also not loaded by, like, there's just no other way to put it, just unloaded anti-nukes. Of course, that still has the mental effect of, like, I'm sure Matt's seen it, and Matt is like, that has to be loaded. It's been sitting there for like 10 minutes. But due to the constant usage of all of their mass, Juicy is in a bad situation where he can't just load it. He honestly just can't load it, can't afford it, it feels. But overall, the mass gap is, I can't tell if it's growing or closing. It seems to be about 20k and staying steady right there. and Matt has increased the efficiency of their units slightly. It was a little bit lower earlier. These broadswords just going around trying to stop any kind of expansion, which is a good strategy, but at the same time, this area is producing a lot of mass for Juicy, and Juicy could eventually resort to mass fabs or RAS support comms. Speaking of which, do we have either of those out from Matt? We do not, from the looks of it. We do still have the comm of Matt out here very precariously. At this point, Juicy has the opportunity to look for a snipe, and Juicy is now sending out a massive scout wave, having not scouted for a long time. A lot of gray buildings over here, not knowing too much about what the opponent player has done. Of course, now seeing that Matt is over here at this fire base could possibly give Juicy the inspiration needed to pull off a snipe. But we will have to see. The nuke launcher currently sitting around 90-ish% complete. And honestly, if the nuke is just launched whenever it's finished, then the nuke will kill off a significant portion of the base, because if the nuke is launched, then that is just going to be a kill. Honestly, I'm surprised that this anti-nuke is not yet loaded. It seems like a grave error out from Juicy, who's done every other part of building up his defenses properly, and is now possibly going to fail due to a massive oversight, not realizing that you need mass to load that anti-nuke, and spending all of your mass constantly on, honestly now, redundant things. All of these T1 land factories, they're not giving you any value. These Lobos, these archers, they're no longer doing anything for you, as your opponent has T2 and T3 armies that are just slapping them down every few seconds. You need these to either be T3 factories or be nothing. Be reclaimed, honestly. The T1 air factories producing air scouts is still a good idea, but not quite so much. Also, we do not see any switch to strat. Oh, wait, we do see a small switch to strat bombers, it does seem. And the nuke is launching. That was just luck. And the anti-nuke is not loaded. It's been here for since the 32-minute mark is whenever I first saw it finish, and it's been almost 30 minutes, and this anti-nuke is not finished because he was mass stalling the entire time. Of course, the comm of Juicy does seemingly know that it's in danger and is running away from this, but the nuke is going to come down and kill off the most beautiful fire base of all time in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that's the end of it. Oh my word. That's the end of the ultimate firebase. But we do have to take into account that the ultimate firebase is still flanked by two very imposing firebases. This firebase and this firebase are still very good firebases that can protect this area, and Keeley, the anti-nuke, was not killed. The anti-nuke could very possibly protect him from a second nuke, but Juicy is going to be sitting over here possibly building up another defense, and maybe even just rebuild the entire firebase if given the option. Of course, now you do have the threat of the Fat Boy that has been completed. This lovely Fat Boy with a broadsword sitting on its back, having a nice, beautiful time. And you do have the option of the Fat Boy now, which is going to be a much more effective option. There are still Clink Hammers, and Juicy is building more, but okay, we're not counting 5. 6 Clink Hammers is not going to be enough to deal with a Fat Boy very quickly, especially whenever you have a T3 army approaching the base in question. And this T3 army, as long as it stays out of the range of these T1 PD, definitely ends up killing off all these Clink Hammers. Even if it walks face first in, Probably kills the Clink Hammers, but dies to the T1PD as long as the T1PD can stay alive. T1PD have a ton of DPS, and we can see now that there are more units coming out of the base of Juicy. Juicy is now producing more units because less of their economy is being spent on things like point defense, things like shields, things like Clink Hammers. Of course, still a significant proportion of the economy is being built on that, and maybe there's not more units. It feels like there's more units flowing since there's not as much build power devoted to that kind of thing, but there's also a lot less mass because 2 T3 mexes did go down. The Percival's now pushing in, getting good. For once, the Percivals aren't just getting mowed down by a fire base. They are making good progress in towards the main base of Juicy. And Matt has admittedly, maybe not through any fault of his own, come into a situation where honestly, if that anti-nuke was loaded, this game probably goes on for another at least 15-20 minutes as Matt has to find a way to snipe the anti-nukes. But since the anti-nukes aren't loaded, it's just a massive issue. This anti-nuke's about to end up loading, sitting at 99%. Come on, just a tiny bit more. Just a tiny bit more. Come on, Nuke Eliminator. You can do it. There we go. Nuke Eliminator finishing that up. And both of them are loaded, so there's possibly 2 opportunities where Juicy can survive a nuke. But at the same time, it's just such a painful situation to look at. As Juicy starts to fall back, the Fat Boy getting inroads into the base, going to be causing massive issue for the opponent on this one. And we can see many units fighting over here. And I think that at this point, with the Fat Boy here killing off all of this, I don't think that... Oh my god, this takes so long. I don't think that this that Juicy any longer has a chance of winning this game. I do admit that this game was a little bit one-sided with all of the map control going to Matt and Juicy never really seeming like they had an idea of how to end the game. But I still think it was a pretty epic game. I still think it was very interesting to just see how effective a fire base can be, in all honesty. And I've had fun casting it, so, you know, there's all that. I'm going to speed up the game because there's very little left that Juicy can do. And we're seeing a second nuke come out. This nuke will be shot down. So that is very important to note. And of course, this is going to be the end of Juicy. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to my patrons, Timothy Calderwood, Sergeant Syphilis, and Nogthar for subscribing at various tiers that allow them to have their names said in my videos. Thank you to all my other patrons. Thank you all for joining. I love each and every one of you. Yet again, let me know in the comments if you want to possibly help for a prize pool for a Dark Heart tournament. And I would love to see you in the next one. Like if you liked it, dislike if you didn't like it, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!